Welcome back to the 15th Annual Pre-NAB Editors Lounge. And now we are going to continue with the questions, and we are soon going to be opening up questions from people on Twitter and from you lovely people in our audience. Kathryn, can you discuss your experience being a female editor?
My experience is a positive experience. I think definitely women are typed. I think women are breaking boundaries now, and there are more women that are cutting, action and heavily visual effects driven movies, horror. There is definitely a movement in Hollywood to hire women. I mean, my agent actually even said to me, probably off record, that he has received calls saying, we, need to hire women. I read an article yesterday that said, of all of the different branches of jobs that you can have in the industry, editors have the most women. But I think that, we definitely have to push through some stereotypes, and I think that, the field of editing is just like any other field. If you have the passion and desire, the opportunity, you can create the opportunity.
Well, I'll add to that. At Bunim, we're very aware that when we hire entry-level people, that is where you're drawing from future editors, future women, future men, diversity, whatever. So we're very careful to be as inclusive as possible and be very aware of the numbers of people that we hire. And we, obviously we're looking for the best candidate, but we go, wait a minute, that was like 7 guys. Where's the female point of view? And we try to balance it off at the very beginning. And that manifests itself later on.
And it's not only women, it's just diversity in general. I have noticed that I'm working at Moviola now, and I just noticed that in the lounge that there seems to be a greater mix of people than there normally would be, and hopefully that continues, and that's what we want, just to be people, neither to be male or female in a work context.
On the flip side of the industry, the part that I focus on, which is more the zeros and ones, it's even more male dominated, and I know from a personal perspective, if any of you have seen my series 5 Things, it's out there free. It's out there marketed to anyone who's out there, because I'm a big advocate of there being no barriers to education, especially when it comes to technology. And I know here at KeyCode, at least, a lot of the education we do, the stuff we put out there, is geared towards everyone. It's not, hey, let's mansplain. It's get all the information out to everyone we can without there being that barrier. And I think the more people that do that, the better off we're going to be, because women are severely underrepresented in the technical portion, and some of the greatest minds that I've met that are technical are women.
I thought historically that it was that there were more women editors early.
When it started, yeah.
Yeah, when everything started, and then
right, because of the sewing.
Yeah, very good. Well, now I think we'll open up questions to the audience and to Twitter. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come up?
Oh no.
Please?
Final Cut 7, here he comes.
Oh, Les. Hi, Les.
Is VR the same thing as AI or whatever? You were throwing on those initials before, and the VR question never got answered. Only the AI question.
True.
So as part of that, with the possibility of a lot of those jobs disappearing, what could be entry-level positions? Is it going to be more difficult for people to get started as an editor if there's just kind of like a jump to actually...
Well, right now is the easiest time in history to be an editor, because everybody has the tools. Kids are editing everywhere. You edit in school, you edit reports, you edit projects, you edit stuff to put on YouTube. There's never been as many people editing on the planet as there is now. Monetizing it is the question. How do you get a career out of that? I think we're going to continue. There's going to be more and more places that you don't make as much money because there's more people doing it.
In other words, they'll actually have their own stuff they can now show.
You've been editing at home for how long?
15 years.
Well, there you go. But you couldn't do it before that, before the equipment became cheap enough. Hey, you let me off easy.
I know.
He didn't even go
James,
after
please.
the VR stuff.
I know.
I want to drill down on the AI thing. It's more of a comment than a question, but I think that people often refer to AI in our world and they don't drill down into what that actually means. The things that people were going for at the time was general artificial intelligence, which is artificial intelligence that could do anything all at once. And the types of artificial intelligence we're talking about now are referred to as narrow artificial intelligence, and they solve particular problems, including things like natural language processing, which is one particular sub-area of artificial intelligence. There's also machine learning, which people say isn't even artificial intelligence. It's a methodology of approaching a problem where you start with a bunch of random solutions and then you find out which produce the best results and then narrow them down. Throughout history, people have said that artificial intelligence or automation or originally industrial machinery would eliminate jobs and what would happen. And the history of every bit of industrialization is exactly the opposite of that. When they said that bank tellers would be eliminated when ATMs came around, actually the opposite happened. They started hiring more bank tellers.
How many people go into a bank now and deal with a teller? Every day or as often as you would in the past? Or do you do most banking online?
The point that's being missed is that regular people are going to have access to artificial intelligence with Google's TensorFlow and similar projects like that, which allow people to call up artificial intelligence and make use of services in the same way that you make use of Amazon Web Services or something like that. So instead of replacing the editor, it's really a question of how it's going to empower editors or how it's going to allow editors to do things they could never do before. I want to see it 6 different ways. I want to try it like this and try it like that and be able to iterate more, faster, better. It's a hammer in the hands of a skilled artisan.
You know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for AI or machine learning modules to be like LUTs. Right? Right? Seriously, where you're going online and you're saying, well, this one's tailored to romantic comedies in Romania. Right? Okay, I'm going to buy that, feed it my footage, and that's going to give me something slightly different than another module that has been trained differently or learned differently. And I see a complete market for those kind of modules to plug in for an end result.
And
an AI LUT.
They can even be branded by particular directors. A Tarantino approach.
Yeah, exactly.
The Robert Altman approach. You know, it's like depending on whatever flavor you want.
If it's Spielberg, it'll be all blue.
Yeah.
You know. J.J. Abrams, lens flares.
Yeah, lens flares. Automatic lens flares.
And then you could take the same material and try it 10 different ways.
Sure.
How exciting would that be?
Can you imagine the support forums on that? I tried to use this AI LUT, and this is what I got.
The problem with the approach you're doing, because I use historical models to try to figure out where things are going in the future, because history tends to repeat itself. So you're bringing up history that, you know, cars came along, and so there were no more buggy whip manufacturers, right? But then they needed people to bolt the wheels onto the cars. The difference is that we're now getting machines to fix the machines. And we're getting AI to repair and advance the AI. And when AI gets to the point where it goes, well, I have access to everything in the world, and I can think, it can create whatever it wants. We think, as human beings, we think linearly. That's just how we do. You know, tomorrow I'll be 1 day older than I am now. 10 years from now, I'll be 10 years older than I am right now, hopefully. But that's not how technology advances. It advances exponentially. 200 years ago, you would have walked or ridden a horse to get anywhere. Now you can fly to the moon, okay? That happened in 200 years. For the rest of the entire history of civilization, you rode a horse or you walked.
Moore's law has been progressing, and now we're into a process where graphics processing units are actually doing far more work than Moore's law could ever do, and it's moving faster, and the exponential growth of graphics processors are huge. Absolutely immense.
So my point is, you can't use historical models of how, you know, people move from one job to another when a new technology came along, because that's not what's happening now. Technology is advancing so fast that it's wiping out or replacing, or however you want to put it, jobs without creating replacement jobs for them. When the Uber, you know, when Uber or whoever nails this, has the fully automated cars, and then that becomes the thing, That's 4.5 million jobs in transportation in the United States. They're not going to just find something new. And, you know, it's not just the drivers of trucks and cars and buses and us driving cars, et cetera, but it's also, you know, the dispatchers and people who write auto insurance claims and on. I mean, you know, it's just miles and miles of people that are going to be out of work. Where are you going to come up with that other 4.5 million jobs to replace that just because now we have autonomous cars? This is probably going way off track for an editor's lounge.
What you're discussing is the skills gap, and it's an essential issue for everyone to understand in our time. There is a big disparity between people with certain levels of technological skill and those without technological skill, and the people without technological skill are likely to be displaced. But I think we all should be thinking of what are the solutions for the skills gap, because how do we get people to be more technologically literate and draw more people into making technology benefit their lives instead of taking...
We're preaching the same thing.
Well, we are. Different sides of the coin, but it is the same.
Yeah, it's what we need to be talking about as a society.
We have a question here from Twitter from Mike Kavanaugh. Outside of high-end film and TV markets, what's Avid's future?
Oh, he goes to the throat.
Mike Kavanaugh is the owner of Key Code Media, by the way. Bleak.
Oh, you think?
Even with the management change.
That's really helpful for us who use the tools in the short term, but, you know, they have serious competition to try to get past and adoption levels. If you give a young person learning to edit, you teach them a little bit about Premiere, you teach them a little bit about Final Cut 10, and you teach them a little bit about Media Composer, they're not going to gravitate to Media Composer. It's just too hard to do, and they don't know that there's a value in being able to work on have multiple editors working on the same project at the same time, which is still Media Composer's strength. That doesn't mean anything to them, so which one's easier to learn? I would argue Final Cut obviously is the easiest. It's pretty almost drag and drops.
If you'll allow me to take my key code hat off. Yeah. So I'm speaking as someone who is no insider info that I'm divulging. What's going to have to happen is someone's going to have to buy Avid. And I think Avid should spin off the audio portion. I think there should be an audio company that should buy it. I think there should be another video company or cloud company that buys Avid's IP, puts that in a cloud somewhere, get rid of the storage, get rid of the hardware, because that's commodity. What they've got is the IP. And I'm not saying, again, I know I have no insider information, but the fact that they're partnering with Microsoft, hey, that's very interesting, right? Microsoft has a search engine so you can find media. Now, how about a way to create the media and edit the media? Hey, that sounds like a good partnership, right? I'd love there to be an audio company to carry on the fantastic legacy of Pro Tools. There have been rumors that other audio companies have tried to buy Pro Tools. Again, rumors, unconfirmed. And Avid doesn't want to go that route. Again, rumor. You know, they don't want to sell off that division. But I think it would make incredible sense because the Hollywood market is shrinking compared to the rest of the media being generated, and as evident by the amount of people using Vegas and the amount of people using Resolve and the amount of I'm serious in the YouTube arena, people using other tools. There just isn't a sustainable amount of people to keep Avid going where it is. And I don't think that heyday of influx of cash is going to come back.
And that explains the stasis, paralysis, stuck in the mud of the UI and where they are and why the color corrector hasn't been improved.
And not to get into the soapbox, but Avid is one of those odd companies that, unlike any other NLE, they're stuck appeasing everyone in this room who's been cutting on Avid for 5, 10, 15, 100 years, right? Who makes their money on Avid and doesn't want anything to change because this is how I make my livelihood, and yet they need to attract new editors who don't want to edit the way everyone else does, right? Adobe doesn't have to deal with that legacy stuff. Apple doesn't have to deal with that legacy stuff because they just jettisoned Final Cut 7, right? Yeah. So Avid is the only company that has to play both sides of the fence in a declining market.
It's a difficult position.
I don't know anyone that could survive that. So I'm...
So it could go full circle. You know, they bought DS from Softimage from Microsoft, and now they end up being owned by Microsoft.
Again, I don't know. That's all speculation. Last thing I need is to get an email.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to get an email tonight from the folks at Avid. Why are you saying this?
Another question from the audience? Anyone? Okay. Oh, yes, please.
Adobe. tied to versions of OSs. I've been at a couple of shows in the last week that are using it collaboratively and so forth. But I see this tendency with Resolve as well, tying things to OSs. As people with infrastructures, big infrastructures.
What do you mean by tying things to OSs?
The version of Adobe that you run is tied to what your OS is. So when Premiere projects especially go around, they can move forward, but they can't move backwards. And as facilities or big installations, and you have clients like that, how do you approach this thing? Because now there's new software every month, every week. I mean, I updated my OS last week and I lost 3 different drivers and this and that. And the thing is, and then next week, another Adobe project will come in from an outside editor. And I can't load that thing because I have to stay on this for my SAN solution and this and that. How do you guys, I mean, as we poo-poo Avid for its stoicness and whatever, I mean, how does the industry approach that?
Hasn't that been the same thing with Avid? Oh, you can't update your OS because you screw up your Unity,
No, but
ISIS,
he's
Nexus.
talking about you can't go backwards into older
I can
issues.
open up an Avid project from 6.5 to whatever.
A project, but when you're working with Unity, ISIS, Nexus, and you can't go back either.
And a project comes in on the current version of Adobe, and I've got last year's version, and I can't move. It's more prevalent in some of the newer pieces of software. How are you guys looking to the future?
Well,
As much as you can future-proof that stuff.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, that's why we're on Avid.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
my
also marketed
perspective.
that way a bit too. I mean, you got things where AMA plugins only work on 10.10.
Sure.
And Nablet and
It's
stuff.
multiple startup drives.
I've
I've got 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah, I know.
From an integration perspective, the multiple boot drives, one of the good things about Adobe is that all their download.
AI. AI is going to solve all this.
Adobe obviously.
There you go.
Adobe obviously has the ability to have different builds in your machine, so you can have 2018, 2017, 2016, so if you need to load up an older version, newer version, obviously the project files can't go back. That'll grant you. But it means if someone comes in with something from 16, you can open it in 16. My hope is that since Adobe introduced shared bins, that will somehow get around that, where you can open multiple projects as bins at the same time inside of Premiere, and hopefully that'll get around that in some respect. But aside from keeping multiple boot drives and multiple versions, there really isn't. And the whole XML export and then bring that in is just not good.
This could be this is John Moore, by the way, a new Moore's Law. The more OSs you have, the worse your post-production experience will be.
I'm living the Hollywood dream there. My other question was...
Just 1 minute. Kathryn, did you want to say something or no?
The Avid is industry standard. And Pro Tools is industry standard. And at this moment in time, there isn't anything that can replace Avid and Pro Tools in terms of working on projects that need to be delivered to networks or theaters or, So I'm a little confounded because on the one hand, it seems like movie making or filmmaking as a hobby, which is one thing. And it's another thing when it's your vocation. I guess the reason why I've been completely quiet up to this point is because what I have to say really isn't relevant in terms of what we're talking about. Because we're talking about, general users.
But that's the point. There are so few people doing what you're doing.
Right, it's a
that
different thing.
It can't be a sustainable business
Exactly,
model.
it can't be. No, it can't be financially.
But it's why somebody will buy Avid. I mean, Media Composer won't disappear. Somebody will pick it up because there's a huge installed base. You look at what, it's interesting because you think you're on a high-end film, let's say Guardians of the Galaxy. That's pretty darn significant film, right? But how many Media Composers do they actually run? Where you really see it is you go to the broadcasters
6.
where...
Or unscripted.
Yeah, or unscripted. How many do you guys have now?
Tons, right? Yeah.
They have like hundreds.
Right,
It's
hundreds,
ridiculous.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's part of why if you're working on smaller stuff, we don't get as addressed by Avid. Avid's primary focus is on the broadcasters because that's their big market.
Oh, absolutely. Broadcasting is it. Yeah. And news.
But that's why it's not the product won't disappear. Somebody will pick it up. If the company goes upside down or something, somebody will pick that up because there's that installed base there already.
Well, and the other thing that Avid is doing is that in most universities and film schools, they've installed themselves, and so as the industry.
But so is Adobe.
Yeah.
So
And Final Cut.
And
Not as much though as Avid.
Most deployments we're doing are co-branded. It's whether it be a bid that comes out says it's got to be able to run Avid, Adobe, and if it's Mac, well then we'll do Final Cut, but otherwise it's PC, so that's going to run Avid and Premiere. Yeah. Yeah. Vegas.
Shall we go on to your second?
Sorry, John.
You mentioned editing on a Kim and all that, and going to the optical printer and all that stuff. How do you see that experience affecting your ability to more efficiently pre-visualize? Or, like when you grow up on a nonlinear thing, you can slap stuff together 10 ways to Sunday, but when you had to cut and paste and whatever, you had to think it through ahead of time. Could you speak to how you think that might influence you now in a nonlinear platform to be more efficient or pre-visualize? I think I've heard other editors talk about it and stuff like that.
Absolutely, because I used to initially sit and watch dailies with the director and watch everything from top to bottom, and there was much less, and at the end of watching everything, I pretty much knew how I was going to put together a scene. I knew where all the sweet moments are, and or the, not sweet, but the points I wanted to pull together, what the heart of the scene was, and how I was going to tell that story. And I think I still work that way. The frustration I have with some assistants that come to work with me is, they've been weaned at home, just like really rapidly, putting things together this way, that way, let's try it this way, that way. It's kind of, there's no preconceived intent. And actually, we started talking this morning because I was listening to an interview with Jack White, who just, made a new album, which he recorded in his apartment with the original sound equipment that he used when he was a teenager, recording in his bedroom for the first music that he ever recorded. And he was saying it's not the tools that you have, it's knowing what you want. And I think that when I sit down, I kind of know what I want a scene to be about, and so I do preconceive. Yeah, as I'm sure you do too, probably. You're an editor as well, so yeah. So it's a different way of working, and I feel like everything now is just so fast and random, and everything's about speed, but I try really to be mindful about my work.
what about the word committed? And what I'm talking about is
I can't commit.
No, committed as far as tracks and definitive choices, rather than just stack up tracks and leave immediate options open. Do you drill down and have, let's say, just one track or two tracks and commit to your choices? This shot, that
absolutely
shot.
commit to my choices. When I'm working on big musical numbers or whatever, I'll have if it necessitates multi-tracks, then I have multi-tracks of video. But it's not random. I'm not like rolling stuff back and forth and thinking, oh, maybe this, maybe that. The beauty of working non-linearly, of course, is that we can try things in so many different ways, and we can look at them, compare them, and see how they work. You never could do that on film. It was not possible. But everything is pretty much a choice. I mean, sometimes there's a random edit that shows up, and I'm like, that rocks, when the Avid gives you a little gift, that you didn't intend. I love when that happens. But it's a different way of working. But then again, we're talking about, making films as your vocation. I have a nephew who just, loves to make home movies, and is always playing, with his video camera and making home movies. And, that's like a totally different thing, which can be equally as artful and as expressive. It's just different.
Okay, James, one more time.
I just wanted to address one thing, which is we were talking about dependencies. Mr. Moore brought up that if you have a particular piece of software, it runs on an operating system. If you have a particular piece of software, the certain plugins will work with that operating system, and multiple drives is considered to be the only solution for that problem. And there is a technology out there called Docker, which takes applications that's similar to making a virtual machine, except it's much, much smaller and lighter, because they had the same problem on cloud-based
software that we're having in post-production now. So if you could containerize your applications, you could build a miniature 1% operating system along with the software, and you could have everything on the same drive and simply spin up different sort of, it's the equivalent of virtual machines, but it's a much faster process. Docker is a company that was run by 18 people, and it was a $1 billion company. And if you look it up, I think docker.com or docker.io, it's just to be aware of what technologies are coming.
Is it endorsed by Avid, Adobe, or Apple?
It doesn't need to be.
Actually, it does.
No.
No. And the reason why it does is because folks here who make their living with this software can't call into Avid or Adobe and say I'm having issues, and they say, what are you running it on? And we say, blah. They say, click. Right? So there has to be that sanctioning and qualification.
Oh, please.
My question is, I have 2 kids, and I don't think they ever watch anything that has commercials in it. They either skip commercials with the DVR or they stream it to their tablets. How is the broadcast world going to survive almost in a post-advertising universe? Where's the money going to come from if no one watches commercials anymore?
Product integration.
Yeah, product placement.
So the scenes, the reality that you're looking at will have something on the shelf that is XYZ brand, the car that you drive, all that stuff is going to be bought and paid for by people, and you don't fast forward through that because it's part of the story. It's the environment in which they live in. So that's just the simple way, but it doesn't substitute for what we have now.
It's your historical model again, because in the beginning, early days of TV and radio, you had
You had live
soap
reads.
hours. Yeah.
Soap operas
Yes.
came from the sponsorship of soap companies.
So where is the next generation of money going to come from to pay our salaries as professional editors?
Online. We're doing a show for Facebook right now. They pay good money. Comparable to a network with less hassles. But I will tell you, the quality that they're getting is exactly the same as any of the other stuff that we do, and it's long form. It's 23 minutes, same as a half-hour show on network. So that's one answer. The other is like Netflix and subscription services, where their money is coming from viewers, 10, 12, 15 bucks at a time, but aggregated worldwide. Yeah, it's huge. So that's how they crack that nut.
Thank you.
I have another Twitter question. What strategies and trends should creative editorial shops and post-production be looking at? Wow, how should they address shrinking margins overall? Costs of technology being less, where clients can easily invest in the same tools.
So 3 different questions?
That sounds like a Mike Cavanaugh question.
Bingo.
Well, the answer to the last part of the question, you have to make sure your client's is not paying for the gear, they're paying for you. That's it.
It's the talent, not the gear.
Right, and that's,
we come back to the same
AlphaDogs,
thing
we
in the
built the
end.
model.
And what strategies and trends should creative editorial shops and post-production be looking at?
More cowbell. I don't know. What's the rap air horn sound? You know what I'm talking about? You do. Can you share with us? There's a particular sound that was popularized with Jamaican Bob Marley music way back when, and it worked its way into somebody's song, and now it's on every commercial that's out there. I'm sick of this thing. So, it's popular today. It's going to be old and useless tomorrow. So the best trend to work with is the one that you create. If you're sort of just trying to follow a trend rather than lead it, you're too late to the party.
Any other questions from the audience? Please.
Technically,
We need you up there.
So you're.
Go ahead, we'll repeat it.
Okay.
Okay, so she's asking about comparing working remotely with TeamViewer. TeamViewer is where you can control somebody else's computer remotely. So the Avid is somewhere else. She's actually running the Avid somewhere else from her computer via TeamViewer. And what are the other options? And that's Mike.
Yeah, TeamViewer is not meant as a creative tool. TeamViewer allows you is more for IT based, where you have to look into another computer. You don't need full frame rate. You don't need color accuracy. You don't need high fidelity audio, and you have latency. Something I'd love to throw out there, and forgive me if you've heard this before, is the speed of light. right? From coast to coast takes 40 milliseconds, right? Our network infrastructure in the United States is half the speed of light, or well, 2 times the speed, well, half the speed of light, pardon me. So it's 80 milliseconds, right? So if you have one computer on one side in one coast and one computer on the other, and you're running TeamViewer, and you hit that button, it's got to go 80 milliseconds there, 80 milliseconds back, right? That makes editing virtually impossible.
It worked. It was great.
It was great. So are you a keyboard editor? Yes. Are you a keyboard editor? So you're telling me that you were able to hit all the keys and you had instantaneous response.
Not instantaneous, but I was able to make the cut, read the notes, and deliver.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
that's a little bit different.
That latency would drive you crazy.
Right.
If you had to
I
work
know
all
plenty
the time.
of editors here who have gone on vacation and got notes that said, hey, someone fat-fingered a credit. I need you to go in and fix that. Okay, so they load up their TeamViewer while they're on the beach and go in, and because they know the piece, they know what they have to change. They don't have to check timing or QC. They're just changing one thing and outputting. And that's completely feasible. But when we're looking at a truly creative process, true creative editorial in a distance way, the technology, the only company that really has it, there's the two of Avid, has Avid Everywhere, if you want to sell your firstborn. You know, that's one. And there's a company called Teradici, which does PC over IP. Teradichi.
I think it's just CI.
See, and it's PC over IP essentially, and it's doing a remote secure KVM from point to point military grade encryption, and it is super fast. And when we start moving that technology from the medical environment and move it into the post environment, we now can look at technologies that allow us to edit remotely. If you look into Bebop, is anyone here familiar with Bebop? Not the music, the technology, the cloud-based? Okay. They do something that's based on Teradici, which is running Media Composer in a cloud, and then having a Teradici receiver at your home base, and that talks directly to there, and that gives you your 30 frames a second, and that gives you your higher audio fidelity. And so that's one of the emerging technologies. But in terms of there being a low-cost software solution, lower cost software solution that allows you to edit remotely and have the experience of having a machine right there, it's not there yet. Also, there's another company called Amulet Hotkey. You can tell by a name like that, they're European. But Teradici is PC only, but Amulet Hotkey takes Teradici gear, puts it in an outboard box, so you can plug it into a Mac. Which is why I'm interested in it for the Hollywood arena, because you march into any place and say, you can edit remotely, but it's got to be in a PC. It's click, right? But the minute you can introduce that to a Mac environment, you seem to have a little bit more play.
What's it called? Amulet?
Amulet Hotkey.
Okay.
Les, one more.
Isn't there an issue here with all of this current discussion about the fact that in America our internet connections and all our stuff is so painfully slow, whereas in the rest of the world, at least in the larger developed countries, their internet speeds and things are like 25% faster or something.
Remember my story about Lithuania? Lithuania has, like, I think the third or fourth fastest internet in the world. And what we're doing there now wouldn't be possible if they didn't have such good connectivity. So yeah.
How do you get it from there to here?
Just because we're in America, right?
Pardon me?
But it's slowed down on this side just because you're in America.
How do you get it from there to here that fast?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, for the initial upload is the issue for us because we have such mass quantities of stuff. But yeah, our infrastructure in the U.S. Pales in comparison to some other countries. But that's the same with rail, high-speed rail, that kind of stuff. And if you look at it, the LAX is, I'm sorry, it's a third world country. I mean, there's plenty of airports in third world countries that are better than LAX. So, I mean, that's a much bigger topic than post-production.
But that's one of the things that's holding back some of the things. People say, but they've got all this technology they're doing in certain countries. It's not the same yet because
once we all get bandwidth, it's going to open up so many opportunities for decentralization of technology and resources. And I mean, all of you got bent out of shape when Adobe moved to a rental model. That's what everything is going to move to as soon as you start having everything spun up in the cloud. Sorry.
I have another Twitter question, not from a Kavanaugh.
That was going to be my next question.
I think it's for Kathryn. How does an editor get an agent?
That's a good question. I'd like to know this.
Which is a very technical question.
And this is from Anna Florid.
Hi, Anna. I think it's networking. I mean, it's the same as how you get your first job. How I got my first agent was I had cut a film, and I started to call everyone that I knew who could possibly know an agent, and then somebody eventually hooked me up with someone. And so I guess, you know, that's what you have to do. I don't think that you can send things that you've edited blindly. It will not be received. I think you definitely need to connect with, you need to find out who the agents are that might be interested in representing you, depending upon what your level of experience is.
Do most agents who represent editors, are they usually freelance, or are they usually with an agency?
They're with agencies, or they have their own agencies.
Are there some agencies, because I'm not aware of editor-centric agencies around here. Are there
like
some?
UTA. Well, so there are major agencies that represent above-the-line talent that have discovered that it's really worth their while to have a below-the-line talent representatives, because they can, you know, feed their clients with editors and production designers and cinematographers. And then there are smaller boutique agencies that just specialize in post-production.
And you have to be careful.
Or production and post-production, I should say.
You have to be careful what genre. For example, commercials are much different than feature film.
At some agencies, the film and television departments used to be separate, but actually they're not anymore, because I think that there are so fewer film jobs and so many more television jobs that agencies now represent both television and film editors. And I think and this is another thing that is going on now. I think that there's so much crossing back and forth between television and features. Television has never been better, you know, as everyone says, it's the golden age of television. I mean, there are, and it's attracting the best talent and directors and writers. But back to the agency thing, I think the only way to find representation is to, I would say, go on IMDb and look up, you know, editors, or look up credits on films, and you can see who is representing the talent. It's it's available on IMDb.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the audience, please?
Creative questions. First of all, I love the work you did on The Man in the High Castle.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
When you get the dailies, or when you get a certain, you know, amount of footage and then you look at it the first time, what is that single thing or multiple things that make you say or decide or judge or be like, wow, this director or whatever really knows what he's doing? Is it hitting the beats? Is it the coverage? What is it for you? Thank you.
I think it's a combination of things. If something is well directed, when I look at it, I can automatically see how to put the pieces together. Nowadays, everything's shot, you know, multiple cameras, and there seems to be the same kind of randomness sometimes on set as we're now experiencing in the cutting room. And so we're back to that theme, the theme about knowing what you want and making choices. So I think that when I look at dailies and there's clarity, then I know that it's well directed.
I refer to the second part of that, the less than positive part, is the vacuum cleaner approach to production, where they just suck up everything in sight and without any regard to why or whatever. And you know you're in for a long haul.
It's so refreshing for me when I receive dailies and they've actually made a choice of where to put the camera. Literally. Wow. Literally. Because reality television, you know, has spawned this kind of catch-all.
Sure, blame it on me.
And you're a smart man, you know? I mean, I'm like, you know. And also other things like sensitivity to the actors so that you don't scream cut, like, you know, the second that something's finished, you know, there's a little room around things. Yeah, those are the things that I look for. Is that helpful in some way?
We're going to be wrapping up soon, but I have another Twitter question. Great discussion tonight at the panel. So much to wrap your head around.
Signed, Mike Kavanaugh.
How did you know? No. 4K, HDR, AI, cloud-based workflows. No pressure. We editors just have to know everything. That's all.
Oh, that's a good wrap up.
Yeah.
Yikes, guys!
But we've seen that coming, though, right?
Yes.
You've seen that coming down the road, right? It was okay. You had to use a splice block real well. You had to run that Steam Deck really well, right? And then when it got to video editing, you can do some titling too, right? Yeah. And now you can do some temp graphics, right? So it's been that way for years. You have to learn more and more to remain employable and get the job done.
Absolutely. And the first assembly has 10 tracks of audio, and it has music from top to bottom, temp score, and yeah, that's how we roll. That's what they expect.
Yeah, it's one of the frustrations is once they put all of the tools into you know, the single box, then the client expects you to be an expert at all of the tools.
I don't mind using the tools. I love using the tools and exploring. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. The only problem is that if you're in a rush to lock everything in, then you're not necessarily, you're cheating your end product. Because sometimes you need to play your film without music just to get the experience of the film. As a creative person, you need to know when to use the tool, when to hold them and when to roll them, or whatever that thing is. Yeah.
And to hold them, when to fold them.
Yeah, hold them and fold them. Clearly, I'm not a card player, but yes.
I just want to end with a thank you. You know, you feed us, you give us all this great information, you do this so often. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Les.
So this concludes the 15th annual Pre-NAB Editors Lounge session. Thank you all for attending. It was a pleasure. Linda Rosen signing off. Thank you all.
Thank you.